Welcome to the corner of YouTube where Reddit comes alive. From Am I the A-hole drama to chilling, true encounters you wished weren't real. I dig up stories you can't stop thinking about. So, settle in, hit subscribe and let's dive into today's neighbor from hell stories. Neighbor tore down my illegal fence while I was at work. The professional survey I ordered backfired on her hard. I, 32 male, bought my first house about 2 years ago. It's a quiet cul-de-sac, great for my golden retriever, Barnaby, and Georgially peaceful. Until 6 months ago, when Heather, 50s female, moved in next door. Heather is the type of person who measures the distance between her trash cans with a ruler. Immediately, she had issues with everything. My grass was too wild, it was 2 inches high. My car was too red, it's maroon. But her main obsession was my privacy fence. It's a standard 6-foot wooden fence I installed to keep Barnaby safe. Heather claimed it was an eyesore that blocked her view of the street. She would literally stand on her patio furniture to peer over the top and yell at me while I was grilling. "That fence is on my property," she'd shriek. I checked the county maps. "You're stealing 3 feet of my yard." I told her, calmly, that I used the existing property pins when I built it. But she wasn't hearing it. She started leaving notes. Then she started calling the city, who found no violations. The incident: last Tuesday, I came home early from work because of a migraine. As I pulled into the driveway, I heard a mechanical buzzing sound. I walked around the back, and my jaw dropped. 2 guys with a truck were actively dismantling my fence. 2 panels were already down. Heather was standing there with a smug look on her face, holding a glass of wine. "What are you doing?" I yelled. "Taking back what's mine," she smirked. "I told you it was on my land. Since you wouldn't move it, I hired someone who would." I threatened to call the police. The contractors, realizing they were in the middle of a dispute and not a standard demo job, immediately packed up their tools and left, leaving a gaping hole in my yard. Heather screamed at them as they drove off, then turned to me and said, "I'll be billing you for the removal." The fallout. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just went inside, called a certified surveyor, and paid for a rush property line survey. It cost me $1,200, but I needed it for the lawsuit I was planning. The surveyor, let's call him Dave, came out 2 days later. Heather came waddling out, arms crossed, watching him like a hawk. "Make sure you mark where he stole my land," she shouted. Dave spent about 2 hours measuring, checking GPS coordinates, and locating the iron pins buried deep in the ground. Finally, he sprayed the bright orange line on the grass. He walked over to me and Heather. "Well," Dave said, looking at his clipboard, "the fence is actually not on the property line." Heather let out a cackle. "I knew it. Tear it down." Dave held up a hand. "Ma'am, let me finish. The fence is not on the line because it is 6 inches inside his property. He actually owns 6 inches past the fence." Heather went pale, but Dave wasn't done. However, Dave pointed to Heather's side yard. "That beautiful stone retaining wall and flower bed you guys installed last month." Heather froze. "That crosses the property line by a significant margin. About 4 feet. It's entirely on this gentleman's land." The aftermath. The silence was deafening. Heather turned a shade of red I didn't know humans could achieve. She stormed inside without a word. I sent her a certified letter the next day via my lawyer. I gave her 2 options: pay for the full repair of my fence and legal fees immediately. I enforce my property rights, which will require her to pay to demolish her $10,000 stone retaining wall and remove all the landscaping that is trespassing on my land. She cut a check for the fence repairs and my legal fees within 48 hours. She hasn't looked over the fence since. Barnaby and I have never been happier. My new neighbor disappeared after we heard crying in his garage. We got a new neighbor recently. Initially, I was relieved because the previous owners were a pain, but I'd take them back in a heartbeat after this. The red flags started immediately. No moving truck, just a guy with a van. We never saw furniture go in, just random boxes he would unload in the middle of the night. We tried to be polite and knock on his door, but even though his car was in the drive, he never answered. Our bedroom overlooks his backyard, specifically his detached garage. One night, my wife and I were awake and heard the garage door rumble open. We peeked through the blinds and saw him white tee, jeans shuttling boxes from the van to the garage. A few nights later, the noises got worse. Scraping metal, loud bangs. I looked out the window again, and this time, he looked up. He saw me. It was insanely awkward. He immediately shut the garage and cut the lights. I felt bad, thinking I was being a creep, so I went outside to say hello and apologize. He was sitting in his van. The second he saw me walking up the driveway, he floored it and sped away. At this point, I was suspicious. I walked back to his garage and put my ear to the door. There was thumping inside, rhythmic thumping like something alive was in there. My wife caught me snooping and called me back inside before I could figure it out. That same night, my wife woke me up saying she heard our gate latch open. I went downstairs, turned on the back lights, and heard someone sprinting away. I chased them to the street, but they were gone. The neighbor's van, however, was parked in his driveway. I talked to another neighbor, George, about it. George said the guy was weird and that he also heard noises at all hours. We agreed to team up next time something happened. But the breaking point was Saturday. I opened my blinds to let the sun in, and the new neighbor was standing in his window, just staring at me. He didn't move. He looked like a statue. I waved. Nothing. I turned to yell for my wife, and when I looked back, he had vanished. I went over there and pounded on the door. I heard a door slam inside the house, but he refused to answer. I went to get George. George told me he had texted me the night before because he heard muffled crying coming from the guy's property. We tried knocking one last time as a group, but got no answer. The next morning, the van was gone. It's been 2 weeks and the house is dark. We don't know his name. We don't know what was in the boxes. And we don't know if the crying George heard was a person or an animal. All I know is I really hope he doesn't come back. The night my neighbor from hell tried to break into my house. When I was 7 years old, my family lived in a neighborhood that was best described as rough. To make matters worse, my father traveled frequently for work, leaving my mother alone with 3 young children. We also had a neighbor on one side who was deeply unsettled, a man who was constantly watching our house and who certainly noticed when my father's car was gone for the night. I don't remember the specific details of this night, but the story is burned into my mother's memory. It was around midnight when the first knock came. My mom went to the door and called out, asking who was there. Silence. She assumed it was neighborhood kids playing pranks and went back to bed. 30 minutes later, the knocking started again. This time, she crept to the side window to catch a glimpse of the porch, but it looked empty. In a safer neighborhood, you might brush this off, but my mom knew better. She went to the bedroom, retrieved my dad's shotgun, and sat in the dark living room, waiting. She let us keep sleeping, not wanting to traumatize us unless it was necessary. When the knocking returned for a third time, she didn't go to the door. She racked the shotgun and shouted through the wood, announcing that she was armed and had called the police. The knocking stopped instantly. The police arrived around 2:00 a.m. They swept the perimeter while we huddled inside. When the officers finally came in, they held up a terrifying piece of evidence found right on our doorstep, a 4-foot length of barbed wire. The officer explained the grim reality to my mother. The reason she couldn't see anyone through the peephole or window was that the attacker was crouching below sight level. The plan, they suspected, was to wait for her to crack the door open, then slip the barbed wire over her head to strangle her. Her refusal to open that door saved her life. The horror didn't end there. When daylight broke and the investigation continued, they found fresh pry marks on the exterior of my bedroom window, along with heavy boot prints in the mud. The intruder had tried to get to me when he couldn't get to her. My mom always suspected the creeping neighbor, but we didn't stick around long enough to find out. We moved immediately. Like what you hear? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment to share your take on the stories.